Her name is Zuri, just 11 years old. No father, no home, just her pregnant mother, her unborn sibling, and the unforgiving streets. Every day was a fight for survival, searching for food, dodging danger, and clinging to hope. But one tragic afternoon, everything changed. A reckless hit-and-run driver struck her mother, leaving her bleeding and barely conscious. They rushed her to the nearest hospital only to face another cruel blow. No deposit, no treatment. Zuri had nothing. No money, no family to turn to. Desperate and on the brink of losing the only person she had left, she was told to take her mother away. But fate had other plans that very moment. Zuri crossed paths with the billionaire CEO of the most powerful hospital in town. In tears, she fell to her knees, clutching his leg. "Please, sir, I have no money. Don't let me mother die." What happened next will not only shock you, it will change your perspective on life forever. You'll understand that indeed we're living in a very small world. So sit back, relax, and grab your popcorn because this is a story you will remember long after it ends. And if you're just tuning in, make sure to subscribe and turn on your notifications so you don't miss our next powerful story. If this one touches your heart, give it a thumbs up and share it with someone who needs hope today. Zuri was not born poor. She came into the world surrounded by the warm laughter of neighbors, the gentle prayers of her mother, and the secure arms of her father. Their home was a modest rented bungalow in Surulere Logos, the kind of place where the paint was peeling in the corners, but the air was always filled with the aroma of fried plantain, where the little compound bloomed with hibiscus flowers, and the evening breeze carried the scent of roasting corn from the roadside. Her father, Chuka, was not a rich man, but he was a good man, the kind of man everyone in the neighborhood respected. He worked at a logistics company, leaving home every morning in a neatly ironed shirt, smelling faintly of shaving cream and talcum powder. He always kissed Zuri on the forehead before stepping out and said the same words. "Your name means beautiful, Zuri, and that's exactly what your life will be." Those words made her chest swell with a quiet pride she didn't yet understand. Her mother, Ada, was a full-time housewife, gentle in spirit, but strong in love. She kept the house warm, clean, and alive with food and laughter. On some evenings, when the generator buzzed and the neighborhood fell into its own quiet hum, Chuka would put on old hi-fi music and dance with Ada in the living room while Zuri giggled from the couch. They didn't have much, but to Zuri they had everything. Life as she knew it was simple and safe. But all that changed on one heavy evening that seemed to swallow the sun. It started like any other day. Chuka left for work with his usual smile, promising to bring home suya for dinner. Ada hummed softly as she prepared a pot of jollof rice, and Zuri played with her school notebook, sketching pictures instead of solving the math problems her teacher had given. By late afternoon, Ada set the table, 3 plates just as Salways, and Zuri's stomach rumbled in happy anticipation. But as the sky darkened, Chuka didn't come home. At first, Ida told herself he must be caught in Lego's traffic. She switched on the old TV and flipped through channels, trying to ignore the small ache building in her chest. But then the phone call started. Strange, incomplete calls from neighbors and a man she barely knew from her husband's workplace. Their voices were low and hesitant, as if afraid to say something out loud. One call said there had been an accident on the highway. Another mentioned a collision involving a company vehicle. Still, no one gave details. Aida's hand shook as she clutched her phone. "Zuri, go inside and do your homework," she said, her voice trembling. But Zuri didn't move. She had never seen her mother's face look so pale. Minutes later, there was a loud knock at the door. When Ada opened it, she found a young man standing there, his shirt damp with sweat. He was an amateur cycle rider from their area, and his eyes held the kind of pity that hurt more than cruelty. "Auntie, I'm sorry. I heard your husband." Ada grabbed his arm. "My husband? What? Where is he? Where is Chuka?" The young man swallowed hard. "They say he didn't make it. The motor, it hit hard. He was on his way to work." The road. Ada's knees gave way, and she sank to the floor, her hands covering her mouth. Zuri ran to her, her small arms wrapping around her mother's shaking frame. And just like that, a wall had fallen across their lives. There was nobody to bury, no final goodbye. They were told the accident was so severe that Chuka's remains were unrecognizable. What the police returned to Ada was a burnt, broken wallet, his work ID card, and a single shirt button they claimed was found near the scene. The funeral rites were brief and hollow. The condolences from neighbors laced with whispers of God gives and God takes. Zuri sat quietly through it all, clutching her father's old wristwatch, which no longer ticked. In the days that followed, the house grew quieter. Not the peaceful kind of quiet, but the kind that pressed down on your chest and made breathing a conscious effort. Every night, Zuri found herself waiting for the sound of her father's key turning in the gate, for his familiar footsteps in the hallway, for his voice calling, "Zuri, my beautiful girl." But the only thing that came was silence. And silence, she was learning, could be louder than anything in the world. And though she didn't know it yet, that silence was just the beginning. Bills do not care for grief. They do not pause because you are mourning. They arrive on schedule, in brown envelopes, in phone calls that never end with sympathy, in landlord knocks that sound like threats that it had been barely a month since Chuka's sudden death. When Ada's strength began to crack, the house that once carried the scent of jollof rice now smelled faintly of dust. The laughter was gone, replaced by the constant rustle of paper bills and the groan of a generator that ran less and less because fuel was now a luxury. Ada's belly had grown. The baby inside kicked as if unaware of the troubles that waited outside the womb. Zuri was only 11, but she noticed everything. The way her mother sat longer before standing. The way her voice sometimes trailed off mid-sentence as though she had forgotten where she was going. School had already stopped for Zuri. The first term after her father's death was left unpaid, and even the head mistress, who once doted on her, began to avoid Ada's calls. "It's not my fault, Zuri," Ada whispered one evening when Zuri stared too long at her old folded uniform. "You will return to school, I promise, boss." But promises could not keep the lights on. The first person to make their situation truly real was the landlord. He was not a bad man, at least not in public opinion. A plump, middle-aged businessman who wore starched white caftans and gold-rimmed glasses. He always had a polite nod for Chuka when he paid the rent on time. But now, without Chuka's monthly transfers, his eyes had changed. The first month after the funeral, he had knocked gently. "Madam Ada, sorry for your loss, but you know the rent is due." Ada had clenched her hands and begged for more time, explaining that she was still trying to sort things out. He gave her 2 weeks. By the end of those 2 weeks, nothing had changed. The logistics company had paid Chuka's death benefits, but almost all of it went to settling debts, the hospital bills from the funeral arrangements, the church contributions, even the transport for distant relatives who came to mourn. What remained could barely buy food for a month. The landlord's second visit was colder. "This is business," he said, though he didn't quite meet Ada's eyes. "If you can't pay, I have no choice." By third visit, he didn't bother with sympathy at all. He came with 2 young men whose arms bulged under their shirts and whose expressions left no room for negotiation. They didn't shout. They didn't threaten. They simply began to remove things. The television gone. The standing fan that had been a gift from Chuka's office gone. The plastic dining table, the mattress from Zuri's room, the small gas cooker, all loaded into the landlord's pickup truck. Zuri stood in the corner clutching her school bag, even though there was nothing inside but a notebook and her father's old wristwatch. She felt as though pieces of her life were being carried out one by one until soon nothing would be left. "Please," Aida's voice broke as she followed them to the door. "I just need a little more time that I'm pregnant. I have a child. Where will we go?" The landlord shrugged, already turning away. "If you pay the rent, you get your things back. Otherwise, I'll consider them payment for the debt." When they were gone, Ada closed the door and leaned against it, her hands trembling. Zuri watched her slide down to the floor and bury her face in her palms. For a long time, neither of them spoke. That night, they slept on mats borrowed from a neighbor who whispered, "Sorry, but you know how Logos is." It was the first time Zuri truly understood what her father had meant when he told her, "Life can change without warning." She just hadn't known it could change so much, so fast. When the landlord finally told them they had until the end of the week to vacate, Ada decided there was only one thing left to try. Family, she thought, could not turn them away. She still believed that despite how quiet Shuka's relatives had been since the funeral, blood had a way of remembering itself in hard times. And so, one hot Monday morning, Ada wrapped her belly with a faded wrapper, dressed Zuri in her cleanest dress, and they began their journey to UCHE, where Chuka's elder brother lived. It took 3 Danfo rides and a long walk under the punishing sun to reach.